What if I told you that before there were fake news everywhere and an administration seemingly bent on revenge, there was a man who convinced millions of Americans that their own government had been infiltrated by enemies hiding in plain sight? It wasn't Donald Trump this time. His name was Joseph McCarthy. He was a Republican senator from Wisconsin during the early years of the Cold War, when Americans were genuinely afraid of the growing power of the Soviet Union and communism. Now, to be fair, the fear was real. The Soviet Union had developed nuclear weapons, communist governments were expanding, and several genuine Soviet spies had been uncovered in the United States, so Americans wanted answers. McCarthy gave them someone to blame. On February 9, 1950, he claimed he had a list of communists working inside the U.S. State Department. He first said that the list contained 205 names. Later, the number changed, but by then it almost didn't matter. The headline had already done its job. Many of McCarthy's accusations were never proven, yet government employees, military officers, teachers, professors, journalists, actors, and ordinary citizens found themselves accused of being communist sympathizers. Some lost their jobs, some were blacklisted, and some had their reputations destroyed. It wasn't because they had been convicted of spying, but because they had been accused. McCarthy understood something incredibly powerful. If you can convince people that their country is under attack from enemies within, they will often accept extraordinary measures in the name of protecting it. And that's why Joe McCarthy still matters today. Because when politicians begin describing fellow Americans as the enemy from within, history tells us to pay attention. Now, I'm not saying America today is the same as it was in the 1950s, and I'm not saying that. The circumstances are different, the legal system is different, and every investigation should be judged on its own evidence. But the political language, that sounds familiar. Donald Trump has repeatedly described political opponents as the enemy from within. His administration has pursued high-profile cases involving people he has publicly criticized for years, including former FBI Director James Comey. Anthony Fauci, who became one of the most recognizable public faces of the COVID-19 response and a frequent target of Trump's criticism, has also faced intense congressional scrutiny from Republican lawmakers and spent most of a day this week having them scream at him in a Senate hearing. And then, of course, there's Kash Patel. Before becoming FBI director, Patel published a list of people he described as members of the so-called deep state. Many of them were people who had investigated, challenged, or criticized Donald Trump. So it's worth asking, when political leaders repeatedly identify certain people as enemies of the country, and those same people later become the focus of government investigations or public campaigns, where should Americans draw the line between legitimate accountability and political retaliation? And that's not a question for Democrats or Republicans. It's a question for anyone who believes governments should investigate people because of evidence, not because of who they are or what they've said. Joe McCarthy eventually fell from power because Americans began to realize that fear is a poor substitute for proof. The U.S. Senate formally censured him in 1954, and his name became synonymous with making damaging accusations without sufficient evidence. History doesn't repeat itself exactly, but it does leave warning signs. And maybe the biggest lesson is this. The moment we stop judging people by evidence and start judging them by labels, communists, Marxists, socialists, enemy from within, we risk repeating one of the darkest chapters in modern American political history. History isn't just something we read, it's something we choose or should choose to learn from.